So hello everyone, welcome to this week's Share Out. We have a very special guest speaker today, Kevin Liang, who was introduced to us by Amy. So Kevin, I'll let you do a little introduction on yourself, and then I'll pass the presenter role over to you. As usual, please mute your microphones unless you have questions, and feel free to use the chat if you have questions for Kevin as well. Okay, Kevin.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, I'm Kevin. Thank you for having me, everybody. I am a UX researcher at Uber Freight. Freight is the trucking division. If you haven't heard of it, we act more like a traditional brokerage for trucking companies and customers like Walmart, Pepsi, etc. But we're a little bit more tech focused. So our mission is to help carriers and trucking companies make that connection with the customers more easily. Yeah, my background is in biology and psychology, and I've been working in the UX field for about 5 years now. Paula, my manager, wasn't able to make it this morning, so it'll just be me. Today, I want to talk a little bit about spicing up your UX research. So let me see if I can present it. Oops. All right.
You see your deck. You're good.
Awesome. All right. So, yes, I want to talk about spicing up your UX research. I know in my blurb, I talked about a lot of the times, including myself, I find myself sticking to the same methods to answer some questions over and over again. And maybe this might be due to time constraints or other limitations. So I'm just like, this is a method I know. This is a method I know will answer the questions, but the data you get might be prescriptive. So today I want to talk about creativity in UX research methods and also presentation. And if you have any questions, please chat or just speak up. All right. So the first thing I wanted to kind of go over today in our presentation is I wanted to answer a couple of questions or try to answer a couple of these questions with the deck today. I know these are weird. The first one is, what do marriage and smartwatches have in common? What does a lockbox and online accounts have in common? And the third one's more technical. Should you always be creative with methods? So we'll try to aim to answer these questions today. First, I'd just like to start off with an example. And for this one, I would love your thoughts and your participation. So let's imagine that your product isn't doing so well. I know Pearson's awesome. I've used all your books, so there's nothing wrong with it. Hypothetically speaking, let's imagine that you notice a product not doing so well. You notice people stop using it after a while, and you want to find out why. Maybe I can get a couple people to just like shout out some ideas, like how would you approach this? And there's no right or wrong. So
I'll chime in right away. Get data and research and analytics on usage for starters to see identify any key problem areas, like are they struggling even getting into the product, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting data and research in there to find out what's going on. Any other ideas how you would approach finding out why this is happening? If not, I mean, that's okay. A lot of times we might do interviews. We might just talk to our customers and ask them questions like, what could we have done to improve? Or like, why did you stop using? What could have been better? What was it about this product that didn't meet your expectations? So a lot of these questions we could ask, but one really fun idea that I've done in the past, has anyone ever written a breakup letter? Why I'm dumping you.
We have done these in the past, and they're a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. This is a great way to kind of break that barrier of the really seemingly dry questions. What could have been better? But once you put out this kind of idea of a breakup letter, participants love it. They find it really funny, and it's a lot of fun. Because a breakup letter is very emotional. You can spill all the beans. You can spill your feelings. It's very personal. This method of asking why'd you break up with the product, so to speak, can get you a lot of the emotion data that you otherwise might not get from just the typical questions. So this is one example of one method you can use. Another could be the sentence completion method. Annie knows, which is where you just come up with a stem, Like, if I were to stop using this product, I would feel blank. Or if I had this product, I would feel blank. So those are some methods we can use in addition or apart from just interviews.
Yeah. I'm actually reading your letter. You have some very funny stuff in there.
You kiss your entire family on the mouth. You wore sweat to my grandma's funeral. So yeah, this is not my letter. Just to make it clear. Okay. But here's another example. So autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars have, the concept of it has been brewing for decades now. They've been around since the 70s, but they're on the streets nowadays. Most of the research regarding self-driving cars has gone towards the interior of the vehicle, understanding the driver and the passenger. But little has been done on how people from the exterior interact with the vehicle. Traditionally, if we're about to cross an intersection, we might look to the driver, make eye contact, wave them by, flip them off, who knows. But what if you were to look in the car and didn't see a driver? What would you do? How should we react? So how would you go about understanding this scenario? This is a tough one because maybe you don't have a self-driving car in the back of your pocket to just test. Maybe you could use some VR simulation or a video game. I can explain something we did at Volkswagen. When I was working at Volkswagen, we actually had a vehicle equipped with certain lights. And if you can see in this photo, it's inside of a tent. So we did this in like a Bay Area fairgrounds. We built the whole tent. We laid down the course, like the lane tapes. We bought stop signs to really simulate an environment of the car stopping at an intersection, and we had participants cross the intersection. So this was let's just say it was like a big budget project to understand how people interact with the vehicle from the outside. And a lot of controlled variables here. For example, we did this inside of a tent so that we can control for the lighting. If this was done outdoors in the bright daylight, they might not be able to see some of the LEDs and the icons. And we also had sound effects. And this one's funny. We had 3 different conditions. One of them was just a generic chime. It would just go ding if it were to stop at an intersection. One would shout or command, please cross now. And the third condition was pedestrian detected. So it was more passive. We didn't include this in the actual testing, but the engineers had a lot of fun just trolling. They included a 4th condition, and it would say target acquired. So not very ethical to do, so we didn't add that in, of course. We got a lot of data from this regarding how they would interact or how they would perceive the vehicle, and some things that we didn't expect to get from the testing. We were just focused on whether they noticed our interface on the vehicle, noticed the commands, but we got a lot of information about perception. You see this vehicle here is a black Audi A7. A lot of people described it as sinister, evil, mysterious. If you ever looked at some pictures of some Google self-driving cars or neural self-driving cars, they look really friendly. They look cute, like little bugs. So perception really has a big factor, trust as well. Data that we didn't really expect or think about before we did the testing. But if you're asking if this is the actual self-driving car, well, not really. As you can see in the front seat, my colleague was wearing a car seat costume. So it was more of a Wizard of Oz type of study. So we couldn't just have a self-driving car tested. I mean, it'll go a little bit over budget, but that's a constraint to think about. Budget is always a constraint. And I'm sitting in the back seat operating the interface, well, the LEDs and the sound effects. So another constraint would be if the budget was $1,000, we wouldn't be able to do this. And so we would have to think of different ways. And those are some of the reasons that forces researchers to think of different methods to understand your research questions, to understand those research goals. It could be budget, it could be timeline, it could be hard to reach participants, which I'll really quickly go over this example. This is what I'm doing these days at Uber Freight. Truck drivers are hard to reach. They're less tech savvy and not your typical participant that you can easily get. So unusual constraints here. Some of them have flip phones still. So how would you begin to understand a truck driver's life? Well, my manager, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, did research on trucking companies in Europe. And that demographic is 180 degrees from the US market. There's literally no way to recruit them. Trucking companies don't trust Uber, or some of them don't even have heard of Uber Freight. So instead of trying to reach out to them through recruiting, we did some intercepts instead. We went to truck stops and waited for truck drivers to stop by and just did some interviews that way. So when your back is against the wall, it's a good incentive for us to get scrappy and use different methods. So the examples I just talk about the constraints. It could include confidential items, different cultures, hard to reach participants. And the method that you use dictates the type of data that you get. The method that you use dictates the type of data that you get. And what I mean by this is, if you're choosing to do interviews, you're going to get interview data. If you're using survey, you're going to get survey data, and et cetera. And as researchers, we want to do our best to make sure the research is valid, the data is valid, and to triangulate other types of data so that we can form a bigger picture and the full picture to dig out some of those insights that we might not get with just one method. Yeah. Any questions so far? Cool.
Yeah, right. We have a quiet group today.
Oh, no worries. I'm usually a quiet person as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. For the next part, I just want to go over a case study of a method that I established when I was at Google. I was on a Smartwatch team. When I joined the team, the researchers were only doing usability testing in lab. So there was no other research done. In fact, the inception of the Android Wear watch was just engineers putting a phone on their wrist and playing around with it. So there was no actual user research done on what the needs were, like what was the product for. So I would just join the team, and I would just ask these questions in the beginning of our usability sessions as a warm-up, right? I would ask them, have you heard of Android Wear? Have you ever tried one? And have you ever considered purchasing a smartwatch? Why or why not? Just to warm up. I didn't really expect anything from it because I was really just there to test the font size or usability things about it. But what I began to hear was, no, I have my phone already. What are they for? I'm waiting until they become more useful. It's expensive for something my phone can do 10 times better. So I thought, why are we fixing the font size? Or why are we caring about the colors of the apps on the watch if people don't really see the value? Why should we build this product at all? So really I asked this question, and I dug a little deeper. I wanted to learn, is this just Android Wear? Is it just my team and this product? So I went online, I looked up some articles, kind of like a desk research. So it looks like a lot of articles would say the same thing. No one's buying smartwatches, or their value is face deep. And I found that the smartwatch and wearable industry had struggled to find value. And I found this, as part of the team, I found this pretty disheartening. Many research papers would say people would abandon their wearables in roughly 3 months, and then they're in the drawer. If you have a smartwatch, I'm not saying that's true of you, but that's the data I got. So no one really knew what it was used for. And being part of the team, I was surprised no one was really talking about this issue. So again, like, why are we fixing the background color and making adaptive font sizes if no one's going to buy it? So I set out to really understand, how people use this watch in real life. I brought it up with my manager, and she was supportive of the idea to do some more foundational things. It's kind of a backward way of doing user research, because you want to do this in early stages of a product, but this has been out already. So now we have to decide how to design experiments. So we have new goals in mind to understand real users in real contexts, how people use or don't use the devices, the joys, the pain points, perceived value, usefulness, etc. How the device really fits into their lives, if at all. So the first attempt at this foundational research was I just had a longitudinal 1 week to 1 month study, starting with remote video interviews, diary studies, some surveys at the end of each day, and ESM, which is experience sampling method. And I did this with both remote and local cohorts. And you might ask, if you want to see people using something in real life, wouldn't you consider field methods like contextual inquiry or ethnography? Yes, but that wouldn't be really practical for us to do on a day-to-day basis with local, with local participants. And I'm in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and most of the people here, they're more tech savvy. They're like an outlier. They know these technologies. So I wanted to test remotely. I wanted to see how people who are still our target market, but just not in the Bay Area, would think about our product. And after doing this first round, I got a lot of good feedback from the stakeholders. We were getting data that the team never thought about. They never really went beyond the in-lab usability data. We got data such as, I'm using it for XYZ. I'm using it for this, or I didn't even touch my watch for the entire week because I didn't really find a use for it. And then we just came up with more questions, and that allowed me to adapt the method and said, okay, well, there are more questions from the stakeholders. I want to help them understand as well. This method was kind of like a testing ground for the method itself, and for me to adapt and add on and be flexible with the method and change things up. Every time we did one of these steps, we found many new things, and the study helped prioritize the team, which each study came new questions. It was a perfect medium to answer those questions. So I added some crazy ways to gather some data. As you'll see, the piloted body cam recording. Yes, it is a body camera. We actually asked some of our participants to strap on a camera and record when they're using the watch at some point, to just record what they're doing. At first, it seemed like a crazy idea, but we ended up getting some pretty good stuff. And we were able to start measuring different types of metrics: time to value, the abandonment or the usage rates. And the last bullet point there, the Gottman ratio. This is interesting. And I learned about this psychologist, this John Gottman. Does anyone know who John Gottman is?
I was just going to ask you, who's John Gottman?
Yeah, so he's actually a marriage psychologist, and his work is based around he can predict with a relative degree of accuracy whether your marriage will succeed or not succeed based on the number of positive comments you make about your partner to the ratio of negative comments you make about them. And the magic number is 5 positive things to 1 negative comment. So again, the magic number is 5. And he would use that to predict how well your marriage was going to work out. So I'm like, okay, well, let's see if we can kind of adapt this ratio to the smartwatch. Because in our diaries, I asked them, what are some positive aspects you experienced today? What are some negative ones? This would be a great opportunity for me to adapt this ratio to the smartwatch. That kind of answers the question we had earlier in the beginning of the slide. What does marriage and smartwatch have in common? Now, I'll go over the ratio in a bit. You don't have to really look at the chart, but this is how we use the Gottman ratio. The Gottman ratio in absolute terms doesn't really mean anything, like 1.254 positive comments to negative comments. And it only is useful if you compare it across cohorts and different longitudinal studies. So that's what I did. I just kept getting this ratio throughout all our cohorts and gave us a better picture of how we were doing. Sometimes we increased marginally, and sometimes we made some mistakes and the product just got a little worse. So we were aiming to get it up. And while the marriage ratio is 5, I don't think the smartwatch ratio is 5. It doesn't even come close. So maybe there's a different ratio for smartwatch retention. Who knows? So this is one of those different ways that I took from a different field of psychology to adapt it to our study. And the impact of this really was it was a reliable method. It was dependable. Stakeholders knew when it was going to happen and what to expect out of it, and it was very valuable because it provided insights into the users in real context. The program itself was just a testing grounds for new methods, and it was constantly evolving. And so the reason why I founded this method in the first place was to solve a deep-rooted problem with wearables. And it helped the team reduce noise and prioritize, because the team would debate all the time, like, what are the users saying? Is this an actual high priority problem? And they would just turn to the study we did, and they'll just ask, did we see this in real life? And I would say no. So what was a high priority problem was just now a low priority problem, because there was a lot of assumptions made. Yeah. So the first takeaway I would just summarize is to take inspiration from adjacent fields, from popular science psychology books, behavioral economics, academic journal articles, different methods you can use to give something stakeholders did not even know they can get. And I think that's really valuable as researchers. And for number one to work, number two has to work. To create a safe space conducive to trying and experimenting with new methods. So what I recommend, or what I found worked really well for us, was the stakeholders were on board with trying the new method because we weren't answering the right questions in lab. So everyone was excited, and they were really on board to try new things. And that doesn't mean you have to be creative with the methods for the sake of being creative. As long as your methods are answering the questions and gathering the data and meeting those research objectives and the business goals, I think those are the times that really warrant a creative method and trying new things.
So, Kevin, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
When you kind of these creative methods, would you run them past your stakeholders first, or would you just kind of go off and give it a test run and see if that method actually can produce good results? Or was it both?
Yeah. So the part that really requires some kind of people skills is like speaking with them about, this is the problem. Like these are the problems that we're seeing, and we're not answering with the methods that we're currently using. Here's some other ways that maybe stakeholders aren't aware of. A lot of the stakeholders that, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but some of the stakeholders I've interacted with, they know interviews, they know surveys, and they know usability testing. Yeah, so when I introduce these different methods that we can try to use, I don't really explain it as this is strictly research method. I explain this is an idea we can do to try and gather new data. And really to get them excited about it and see that there's value in this. This is the type of things that we can get from it, and we can learn how to really improve the product to improve that experience. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I do keep them in the loop. I explain to them, let's try it. Let's do like a 1-week thing and see how that works, and then we can adapt it. If it doesn't work, we just go back to and do what we always did, or go back to the drawing board, right? So I think it's also helpful to kind of map out what you expect to get from it, lay out like, this is the things we want to learn, this is what we'll do with the data that we get, so that all the expectations are set and they're not kept in the dark.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks. Great question, by the way. So for the final slides, I just have a couple more. What I talked about was creativity with the methods. But once you receive the data from your research, we also have to share it out. So there are also creative ways to share research beyond the canonical PowerPoint and beyond the bullet points. And one way is Facebook does this, Google did this. We, on Uber Freight, we did this just a couple weeks ago. We ran a design sprint based on the research that I did with truck drivers. We identified the pain points, the joys, the how might we's, and prioritize some of the ideas. This was a 2-day sprint, and originally we were just going to take down all the posters. We're just going to take it down and analyze and do all that. But we actually decided to keep it up for another day, open up the room to the whole org and the other teams and have them come in and walk through it like a museum. We also included some user quotes on the wall. We included some artifacts from drivers. And in the bottom left picture, you'll see people looking to the left. I was actually running a video of diary studies that the participants recorded for us. So this is a great way to get engaged and look at it from a process point of view of how we came from the insights to our ideas. What worked out, what ideas didn't make it to the to the final cut. Another idea could be video showings, lunch and learns. This is from Facebook. It's not my picture, but you can hold these sessions to informally invite them to lunch and just show some of the research during people's downtime and really get them engaged, like a movie time. And an expo. So I also asked a question about what does a lockbox and online accounts have to do with anything. When I was at Google, I also worked on the account security team, and we would create this whole UX Research Expo to put out all the evergreen facts we knew about our users in a walk space that contained games, facts, videos. You can put on headphones to listen to user quotes and user stories. We had user journey maps out, and this lockbox was we had stakeholders go through a scavenger hunt. And each time they reached a milestone, there was a new fact, and they had to determine whether or not this was a true or false statement, and then eventually they receive a prize. So that was really fun. It is a lot more overhead, and it takes a lot of preparation, but there was a ton of good feedback from stakeholders, and I think it is worth it if you have some time to prep for it, to really get the stakeholders to see the whole story of all the research that your team has been doing. And finally, whatever this is, I see this in the journals, posting up little pamphlets or papers of quick research. So it doesn't have to, research share-outs do not have to be active all the time. They can be passive. In poster form, wherever people will be, this is another way to share out research.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be in the toilet. You could just put out little, maybe like 2x4 cards on the desk, or stand up on like a kitchen, on the kitchen cafeteria. Who knows? So the next takeaway is just try new engaging ways to share research beyond the bullet points. Not saying it's bad, but it is another way to get people to have fun with the research and know what you're up to. And that's it. That's my presentation on getting creative with UX research. Questions? Thank you.
I do have one question in chat. In the Volkswagen test, did participants know you were testing autonomous vehicles?
Good question. Yes, I forgot to mention this. Yes, before they came into the tent, we would pose to them, you're going to be seeing a self-driving car, meaning there's no driver in it. So it was a little bit of a deceit, but that was for our Wizard of Oz to work, to set their expectation that this is indeed a self-driving car. We wanted you to treat it like you would if you were to come across one. So we would, of course, debrief them afterwards and tell them there was a driver dressed as a car seat afterwards.
All right, we have questions coming in. What are your favorite research tools?
Tools, as in like online tools or data collection ones. I really like user testing. I think that's pretty simple, is able to do a lot. Like click tests, heat maps, those things I couldn't really get from other tools like Validately. So I like it because you could do a lot of remote testing with it, record them and clip your video clips in that tool. I have worked at some really like scrappy startups, and just if you're on the tight budget, I think tools like Zoom work really well too. Because on Zoom you can share your screen and let them control it. Yeah, so those are some of them. I think Qualtrics, really robust tool for surveys and card sorting you can do as well. On what's that one tool? Yeah, there's a really popular card sorting one as well. Yeah, those are some of the ones that I use.
All right, then we have any suggestions for sharing findings creatively with remote stakeholders? So Pearson is spread across the globe. This is
Mm-hmm.
the United States. We're coast to coast, and then we have now it's an English or UK company, so the primary headquarters are over in London, but we have UX teams in London and Poland. So like we are pretty much global.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the expo, we actually had teams in Tel Aviv. We had teams in Seattle, not just the headquarters, because we had researchers in all different parts of the world. We had them set up their own mini kind of expo on their end as well. So it was a lot of work for the lone researcher. That was one way to engage the stakeholders in their locale. Of course, that's more overhead, like I mentioned. So remote stakeholders, you can ask maybe someone to help delegate and help post these up like once a month, or do like kind of a movie reel that you can share out and have people share it out for you in other locations. So I would just kind of make some connections in the other offices to who are on the same team or not on the same team to help share it out. So that's a really good question. So if you have suggestions, I'd love to hear it too.
All right. Any other questions for Kevin? So Kevin, it seems like you got the opportunity to work on a lot of cool projects. From the smartwatches to the cars and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, our team only does digital experiences, and we haven't had the opportunity to work on a physical product.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you prefer one over the other, or do you like, combinations of both, or?
Yeah, absolutely. A combination of both. Every product is out there to solve some sort of problem, whether it's digital or physical. So yeah, I just see it more like, is this solving a problem, and how can we help those users solve their problems better? So I don't see digital as being. Yeah, I mean, it's just a different type of work, but you can be creative with both.
That's true. And what made you want to go into UX research in the first place?
Great question. This is so coming from a psychology background and biology background, I was in the research world, and my whole kind of early career was focused towards maybe clinical psychology or being a therapist or counselor. Um, I still loved listening and talking and understanding people, which is why I wanted to do that. But one day, just Apple called me about working with them. I'm like, what? Are you looking for a therapist? Because I had no idea what UX was. And so I just looked more into it. I entertained the idea of, wow, someone with my background can do this. I was really confused. I looked more into it, and I just began to realize, wow, I can really see this work change and really put out my research where people can actually use it. And maybe, I see people wearing the smartwatch on the streets, and I'm like, I kind of did that. So it makes me kind of proud. But really, when it comes down to it, the favorite part for me is just speaking with people and seeing how they think about the product or service that we're showing them. In a sense, to me, this is like clinical, but with a product. I just really enjoy that, at least in the industry, you can see things make it out to the real world and actually helping people. Whereas from the academia route, it would just take maybe years to complete one project and maybe not see it go anywhere.
Right. That's excellent. Cool. And just, my take on smartwatches. I used to wear a watch every day until I bought my first iPhone. Then I stopped wearing a watch. Apple had the watch. I'm like, no, you're the company that made me stop wearing a watch in the first place. Now you want me to buy one of your watches. So that's my take on smartwatches.
Yeah, well, I don't hear, like much different. So, thank you for sharing that. I actually don't wear a smartwatch myself, just a traditional one too. So.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Kevin?
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, it's Annie.
Hey, Annie.
Hello. And for the record, I don't have a smartwatch. But I was really, really fascinated by the body cam that you use to capture data. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because if I remember, you said it was for remote studying. So I thought, oh, well, how did you guys mail like the smart cams to the participants, and how did you work around hurdles of people being like kind of camera shy around and make it could almost feel invasive, like, oh my God, okay, I'm going to be recording stuff, and like just getting them to use it. And did they get to keep it as part of their compensation? I'm just totally curious about all of that.
Yeah, great questions. So for the body cam, yeah, it was a really crazy idea. The idea just came from like, we were just hearing comments from diaries, and I wanted to actually see it. And since we don't really have time to go out and look at it, body cam was the next best thing. So in order to kind of capture the participants, we actually had to ask and screen for people who would be comfortable using it, who are more verbose and comfortable with showing their lives on camera. We screened those people out first. And we didn't force them either. So we also recruited people who were not comfortable with it, and we just did the study with them anyway. So for the few folks who wanted to do the body cam, those gave us really valuable footage. It was more like casting a wide net and seeing who might be comfortable with it, and we paid them extra to do it. And as for the cameras, we did send them a camera to use and set up, along with a body strap. So this is Google budget. Like, I'm like, if you have an idea, you can do it. It's pretty crazy. But at Uber Freight, I actually did something similar using D-Scout. D-Scout's like an online tool for diary studies, and they have a feature for you to ask them to record a video of themselves. And when I asked truck drivers to do it, that gave us a lot of good footage too, because sometimes truck drivers drive through the night. And as researchers, we can't just follow them in their cars all night. So that also gave us footage that we couldn't have gotten. So it doesn't have to be body cam. It didn't have to be. We could have just easily asked them to record with their phone, but that would have been kind of awkward. I mean, the body cam is also awkward, but it was a fun idea. So the people who were comfortable didn't mind it.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. And with the truck drivers, I'm also kind of curious, like, I know you mentioned they're not overly tech savvy, but some of them still may know about self-driving cars. And did any of them inquire about that replacing their jobs, or were they curious about self-driving cars and the truck market? Like, I'm just curious if that came up.
Yeah, so in my conversations with truck drivers, that comes up a lot. Like, oh, you're going to take over our jobs, or I don't want to work with you. For those participants, we just tell them, like, we're not actually researching this. We're just understanding your lives and want to help make it better. So we kind of like, I don't really know about the self-driving car thing at Uber, so I can't really speak much to it anyway. I just focus the conversation back to the research. After the research, I like to chat with them anyway. I'm like, yeah, what do you think about it? And some of them fear it. That's just the general sentiment. And some of them understand that that's the way the world might go. And then I asked them what they think about that. They're like, well, if you can help me somehow, even if it's self-driving, if there's some way that I can help in that world in the future, they'd be happy to. So kind of both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, no, totally. That makes sense. And I know that, even some of that artificial intelligence stuff is entering the research market as well, with ways to automate things that we do in our day-to-day. So completely understood why some are more comfortable with it than others, and, may feel threatened and whatnot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Kevin? All right, Kevin, I think it's a wrap. I can't thank you enough. This has been such a fun and informative presentation, and it's been really, really nice to meet you. I hope we can.
Oh, nice to meet you as well, and thank you everyone for your questions, and I hope you learned something, and thank you so much for having me. It was fun to do this.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks
thank
very
you
much,
again, Kevin.
That was great.
Thank you.